Fireman Rob through a mutual friend in the coaching business. Rob's story is super complex. In fact, complex is an understatement. For my intro, I considered offering up all the bits and pieces of our interview, but truth be told, he's a lot deeper than that. He's a fireman, of course, but he's also a triathlete. He's a passionate public speaker and TED Talk veteran. He's a highly respected author. He's a mental health advocate for first responders. He's an Air Force veteran, and he's even a world record holder. Rob is an overcomer. So even if you want to, you can never tell him your life is difficult, because he'll show you that you are far more capable than you know. This is my interview with my friend, the ultra-committed endurance runner, Rob Verhelst, also known as Fireman Rob, forged on the Rockstar Radicals podcast. So there's a lot to cover today. I want to be kind to your time, Rob, and I know you're one of the business men I've ever met, and you're like the ultimate entrepreneur. And your background kind of speaks volumes about who you are. You're one of what I call superheroes. Somebody who lives their life in an ordinary sort of Clark Kent way. But then every once in a while, you got to jam into that phone booth and, do a little Wonder Woman and turn into something amazing. And you've decided to bite down hard on the sort of the secret parts of your humanity. And I'm excited for you to share that today. So that's my gushing review to start this whole thing.
I'm gonna have to write that down and make sure I use it.
Yeah. You need another shirt that says it. But for the people that are listening, I want to say it one more time. In my defense, I was left unsupervised. It's very much true of Mr. Fireman Rob
for
here.
All Robs, I think.
It is. It's absolutely true. I don't know this. Let's start with that. I believe I'm about 15 years older than you. Am I close on that? Are you in your late?
I'm about. I'll turn 43 in April.
Okay. So a decade. I'm a decade older than you.
There you go.
Which again makes me fat and gross. But that's enough of that. Were you a latchkey kid?
Realistically, I was out and about all the time. I mean,
Okay.
I swam when I was younger. My brother and I, in the summer after school was done, we were at the pool 24/7. My parents would just call up every once in a while, see if the lifeguard was making sure that we were actually still above water. And I've always been very, very active and just always out and about. And it's just been my nature. Actually, it continues to be my nature still to this day, which is interesting. I don't think I've ever really truly grown up. I've just found different passions instead of GI Joes and superheroes like the Spider-Man and Superman. Now I actually have more aspirations of speaking and doing other great things.
Yeah, that's a great way to start it. So I love that, and it's true. What I know of you, it's definitely true. I figured instead of starting with a tell me about your history, childhood sort of thing, let's just jump right into the meat and potatoes of who you are. September 11th was a huge impactful day, not just for America, but for the world, because the world was put on notice. The world was told that day that anything goes, that if a group of people with an ideology that is extraordinarily dangerous wants to, and has the will and the determination to kill a lot of people in the name of whatever they wanted to kill them in,
right,
they could do it. And they could do it to a country like America that has sort of arrogantly believed it could remain separate from the rest of the world, that we were terrorism free, that we had never had a war on our soil that wasn't the Revolutionary War, at least. And terrorism changed the face of everything that day. You, as a young firefighter, decided to make a pretty big step in your life and your career, and which ultimately led you to kind of where you are today. So I'm hoping maybe you'll tell that first day story and then lead us, down that path, because I think that's a pretty powerful thing.
Yeah, it's still to this day when you're talking about it, and I have my hat on today from Black Helmet. It's a great company, but that it still hits me today when you think about that day. And for myself, that morning, actually, I was working on shift at the firehouse, and we had a fire that morning. And when we got back to the station, I was still a rookie. I went upstairs and I was showering, and I heard on the radio that the trade towers have been hit. And I was like, okay, it didn't really register to me at that time until I actually went downstairs and was serving everybody coffee because I was a rookie, and saw on the TV that the second trade tower had been hit.
Mhm.
I was a part of a rescue team, and I actually went home, and on the way home I had been called and said, hey, you willing to come out here? You have to drive. There's no flights going. You willing to come out here? And I said, oh, definitely, yes. And so I actually found trades for myself at the fire department to actually go out there. I got out there 2 days afterwards. I drove out my little purple Saturn and got out to New York City, got all my credentials, and started on the pile. And at 23 years old, there's not really much that can prepare you for this. Even if I had been in the fire service for not that long at all, for barely a year, there wasn't really much that could prepare me for what I was going to see
Yeah.
as I walked from Church Street onto the pile. It's still to this day I go through therapy for it,
Yeah.
just
I can
because
see.
it's something that sticks in the back of your mind. It's something that pops out when you least expect it, when you don't want it to. And 8 full days of almost 22-hour days, uh, working on the pile and just continually just seeing things that to this day I still think about and try to shove in the back of my mind, but it's still traumatizing to me. But some of the great stories that I tell about it are little things that actually happened that I create a great bond with some gentlemen that I worked with from Chicago Fire Department. To this day, Dave still calls me every single day, every single year on September 11th. How you doing today, Rob? And it's little things like that. And one of the stories that I always love is, I can't think, it was about like the sixth day. I walked off the pile. I just needed a few hours of break from everything that was going on. And as I walked off the pile, I was about 2 blocks away from where we were at. And this lady came up to me with, the chickens that are fully cooked that you can get from like gas stations or whatnot. And she said, I wanted to give this to you because I don't have much money and I can't help, but I wanted to just at least help somebody who's helping us.
Yeah.
And that I couldn't even say anything really at that moment. I sat down with it, and as she was walking across the street, I yelled, thank you. But it was little things like that that I try to have stick in my mind more than the traumatic things, to understand and have everybody understand. There was people that were welders. There were people there that crawled into those piles that hadn't done search and recovery or search and rescue ever. And at
Right.
that time it was recovery. And they were going beyond themselves. And I think the coolest part that I can remember about that time that I was there was how we all came together. It didn't matter what race you were. It didn't matter what ethnicity. It didn't matter what job title. It didn't matter how good or bad of a day you were having. We all came together for this common purpose of moving forward together.
Yeah.
It's such a powerful message that needs to happen again.
Yeah. You know, it's actually hard for me, and please understand, I'm not trying to weave myself into your story. I have really no idea.
Right.
I think the hardest part about anybody on the outside of something is they say, "Oh man, it must have been like war, or the aftermath of war." right?
Right.
The cleaning up, the picking up of pieces of a human, somebody's child. And I'm not saying any of these things, Rob, to sort of light an emotional fire in you. So this makes for a great interview, right?
Right.
It's I just don't understand. Um, I have been able, not blessed, but I have witnessed death in my life. I've witnessed violent death in my life. I've witnessed, people, awful things, like every human, I think. And the older we get, the more that becomes an inevitability. But what I've found in my own time in the service, and I imagine it's the same feeling you have as a firefighter, is there's the camaraderie, there's the brotherhood. And the reality is we're all sort of sharing this awful and painful experience together. And that takes kind of an edge off of it. I mean, it doesn't change the fact that you won't carry, sort of the imprint with
Mhm.
you for the rest of your days, because you most certainly will. You cannot unforget
Right.
those experiences. And certainly the smells, I imagine, your brain, when you get the faintest whiff of anything that was like those smells down there, you're
Concrete death.
instantly transported there. I guess I just wanted to say, looking at you face to face and as your friend,
Yeah.
I see that awful thing inside of you that you can't stop. And I think why I couldn't wait to interview you and spend some time with you today. I mean, I'm so excited to talk to you. Is I know you can help us. You can encapsulate what it feels like, kind of, whether we want to hear it or not. You
Right.
can help us understand what first responders go through, and that there are solutions out sort of the pit, if that
Mhm.
makes sense.
Yes.
And there's a path to it. And so please don't let me stop you, but I had to sort of interject, because as I'm
Well,
looking at your face, I can see there's you're right there.
yeah. It's hard to get. It's always one of those things where, you know, and I actually want to go back to that point of what you made is when you think about those moments, and like you said, I appreciate that, because a lot of people say, I can't imagine what you went through, and I can't imagine what you're feeling. And as I've went through this whole process, and for the longest time, I didn't want to get labeled with having PTSD, because it's a detriment in my field. It felt like it was you were less of a person, or that you weren't able to handle it. You're not tough enough. But that's all a bunch of bullshit. That's all a bunch of bullshit. And I only know that now. I didn't know that back then.
Yeah.
There wasn't that feeling. Is maybe there's somebody worse off. And that's kind of goes to that point of I don't know what you're going through. Is that we as humans try to tangibly correlate it to something that we know. And the worst part about that, when you're going through something that's traumatic, is I can't tangibly correlate what I know to what you're going through. That is probably the most critical aspect when you're going through something like this by yourself. And it's not that I don't have great support network. It's just that you have to understand that you are the one that knows the emotions. You're the one that knows the trauma. You are the one that knows whether you're ready to go forward right now or not.
Yeah.
And for somebody else to have to, if they correlate it to something, or they say something that you don't agree with, you have to be okay with that. You have to empathize that they're feeling trauma in the fact that they don't know how to help you.
Yeah.
And it is such a it's a hard thing to go through, because my all my trauma isn't just from 9/11.
Right.
And it was interesting going to a therapist one time, and they said, "Oh yeah, it all stems from there." It's like, no, there's multiple things in your life that correlate to different things. Give me an example of how, after this was after 10 years of thinking about this. I figured out that for me, PTSD, when you think about it from a perspective, and it's a term that's thrown around a lot nowadays. But when you think about it from a perspective, is think about it like a closet, okay? And all these traumatic situations are like hat boxes or clothing boxes, all different shapes, all different sizes. Not all of them fit together perfectly. But what I did for so many years was all of those boxes I just kept shoving in my closet. I didn't care how they stacked up. I didn't care how, what was going to happen if I opened the door again, but I should have. Because
Mm.
what happened was as I'm shoving all these things in the closet, they're all unstable in there. So every time that the door would open because I had a new event that occurred, all of those previous things would fall right on top of me.
Oh man.
And I have to
Oh,
stack them back into that closet. And until you start to realize that if I start to stack those in an order where I understand them, where I'm able to deal with these, every time I open that closet, it isn't opening up those previous pains.
yeah. And it's not. And here's the thing. I got to interject because I know this is true.
Yeah.
You're not stacking anything. You're putting bowling balls on top of bowling balls.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as stability.
No. But
Holy
you can.
cow, man.
Isn't that crazy? That took me 10 years to start to think about it from a perspective of if I'm talking to somebody, and this
Yeah.
is a great example. Like, I love that you brought up, hey, I don't know what it's like, what you're going through, but if somebody thinks of it from like a closet perspective and goes, God, I've had that stuff fall on me. But now think of it from, having to pick up an 8-year-old child after doing, compressions on them and not having them live. That's one of my boxes that keeps falling out. Going to 9/11 on the last day, finding that baby blanket, that's one of the boxes that falls out. But if I'm able to understand how I can put that box back into that closet or what that box actually means to me, it's a totally different world that you can live in. Is it perfect? No. We cannot ever think. And this is the other hard part is like, oh, you're going to get over it. This isn't something that you get over.
Yeah.
And that's okay. You have to be okay with that.
Yeah. A friend of mine, this is really hard for me to talk about, but I'm going to try. Because I think it relates to what you're saying. And I'm trying to find it here online while we're talking because it's not part of my notes for my preparation today.
I love that.
But it piqued something, right?
Yeah.
As you know, I was a professional musician for a long period of time, and back in the late '90s, early 2000s, I had a development deal with this band in Seattle, and our guitar player had a heart condition, and I'm just going to wing it here because I can't find it this
No, that's
fast.
fine. I love it.
He had a heart condition, and I remember when I met him, he said, "Just so you know, I only can hear in one ear, and I have failed heart valves, and I've had 2 heart surgeries so far, and if I have the next one, I'm going to die." Well, in 2015, late 2014, he got his diagnosis that his heart, valves were failing to the point that he'd have to have surgery, and he went in for his surgery and he died. And it's still so fucking devastating. I don't know why it is, but it is. And excuse me, but he was such a challenging human being. That would really be the best way to put it. He lived life so like over the edge that he was kind of hard to deal with. I mean, I'm a big personality and he was bigger, so we clashed a lot.
Yeah.
But he said something, which again, I'm going to try to paraphrase right now, that totally alludes to what you're saying. He said that what we have to do, and he wrote this literally like the day before he died. It was his last thing. He put it on his Facebook page, and he basically said, I'm just trying to say it in a way that was beautiful. He basically said, those that live have the responsibility to live for those that cannot.
Yep.
And he was basically trying to pass it on that if you're reading this, please run with it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, one of his lines was, "I'm going to go down with my Doc Martens on, kicking." And
Yeah.
and this idea that, you know, I mean, we all talk about this. As you know, I recently received a diagnosis that scared the crap out of me, and I've been doing a lot of things to make that better, but it doesn't mean I will be. So
Right.
here I am right now with you, and I'm enjoying this moment. And I've just decided, and again, I'm sorry for making this about me at the moment, but I've
No, I
just
love it.
decided that interviewing folks like yourself, not trying to just interview celebrities, so to speak, but because everybody has a voice and everybody has a story, and those stories are all powerful. There's not one human being in the world
Right.
that doesn't have something completely epic to share. They may not be comfortable sharing it. They may have never had anybody ask them, but it's vital that their story be shared because there's a purpose to every life, as young as it is or as old it is. And as much as I don't want to certainly discount the loss of a child, whether in a fire, you mentioned the compressions thing, or an adult or anybody else in Oklahoma City or
Right.
September 11th, there is no deserve in any of it, but there is still validity in their existence. That tiny moment mattered, and it carries with us, and it's our responsibility to live for them, to carry their souls forward. It's because the 3 generations from now, Rob,
Yeah.
nobody's going to know who we are. Nobody's
Nope.
going to care. I mean, anybody who know us right now, they'll be dead too.
Yeah.
It won't matter. There's no impact from my family from the 12th century. It's cool that I can track it back. So I have a
But
great
it
great
doesn't matter.
great grandparent with the name Cecil,
Yeah.
and it doesn't mean
And
anything. And
right.
and even if there was the internet back then and he could do podcasts, I still wouldn't have any emotional attachment. It
Right.
doesn't matter.
Right.
What matters is now. Now is it.
Right.
So I will go back to my interview to you now and say, thank you so much for exposing this, because it's awful. And yet these exposures are so important, because every time they do, it's like your bubble rises a little bit more.
Yeah. That's so true. And it was interesting when you're talking about being engaged in the moment. That's one of the things I always talk about is the last day that I was there on the pile. As I was walking off, there's huge gaps and all the concrete that had fallen. And as I was looking down, my head was down because I was just so freaking tired. And as I'm looking down, I can see this will look like a blanket. And so I asked, the section chief that was right there, can I go down? Can I go down and get it? And he said, yeah. And at that time, all we did was like a ladder belt and tied a rope to that. And so they could pull me out if something happened. But it was about, God, I want to say about 6 or 8 feet down. And so I crawled down in there. And as I got closer and closer, I could see the print was actually a baby's blanket.
Oh, good.
And so my mind just starts just racing. And as I go down and I grab it, it's got soot, it's got blood, it's just tattered. And as I lift it, I'm just preparing myself, but there wasn't anything under it. And thank God. But I took that blanket and I carried it all the way back with me. And I kept that blanket for years. I cut it into little pieces, and I would hold it with me. I'd take it to the firehouse. I'd have it in my pocket all the time. When I did my racing and firefighter gear, I always had it with me. And then I got to go on. It was my sense of purpose kind of thing. It was me, like you said, it was me living forward for those people that didn't get a chance to. And it was interesting. I went on this Discovery Channel survival show, and we were desolate on an island for 3 days. This was a few days into it, and I was there with 2 other veterans, both who had lost. One had lost his son, and the other had lost, a bunch of his soldiers to suicide.
Oh.
And we're sitting around the fire talking, and we're starved. We hadn't eaten in days. but we're talking, really powerful things. And I had my piece of blanket with me. And for some reason, I pulled it out and I'm looking at JD and I go, I think this has been weighting me down.
Yeah, it's albatross
And
almost.
it was interesting because I took out that, and JD goes, burn it.
Wow.
And I had been carrying this with me since September 11th. This was 2016, 2000, no,
Good
probably
Lord, man.
2018. And so it was part of me. And
Yeah.
I threw it into the fire, and it was that realization when, as I'm watching it burn, that they didn't want me to carry along for them. They wanted me to carry along for myself and to be able to make my life enriched, engage in each moment of my life, and have an impact on others' lives.
Yeah.
Not be burdened down by something that I thought was my purpose and my passion. It was a powerful moment, and at the same time a great realization, like you were saying before, that life is meant to be engaged in. We have traumatic experiences and episodes in our lives, and those people, their lives will live on because you continue to live on and
Yeah.
continue to impact people's lives.
Yeah. I want to share this. I don't actually know I don't want to talk about religion. Okay.
Right.
But at the same time, I think it's important to address this, and that is God knew you were strong enough to withstand something that maybe another wasn't. And and I'm not alluding to the idea that, God placed you there so you could pick up the blanket and you know what I mean? None of that.
Right.
Because because
Right.
because I do believe in a God, and I do believe that things happen, meaning it's not like this idea of divine plan. I agree with to a point, except it's not like he's like some weird puppet thing. And
He doesn't have a
Rob,
plan for 10
right,
years. He
right,
has,
right, right. Yeah, yeah. Rob, I'm going to let you falter all over the place. I'm going to let you find a blanket and totally fuck with your head for 20 years.
Did
That's
anybody
not.
change Rob's plan? Did
Yeah,
anybody
yeah.
see where it went?
That's not quite how God works. I really do not believe that. But I love at least the idea that he knew you were strong enough to carry it. And then he knew you were strong enough to burn it because it wasn't just a catharsis, but he knew you needed to share that story, and he knew you and I would talk. I love this idea. Now, see, I get it. These are all right.
Nothing
These are
happens by accident. That's
right,
that's a
right. But
that's a
but
huge one.
yet, in a sort of a hindsight is 2020, here we are talking about this thing that in 2001 you would not have thought about. You would not have said, in 2021 I'm going to talk to this weird dude in Snoqualmie, Washington, and I'm going to share a story about carrying a baby blanket around.
Right.
You're not Linus. You know what I mean?
Right. No.
And it's and
No.
it's not a joke. It's not funny. But it but it seems to me too, though, Rob, even though you talk about burning it and that, your friend had said, dude, enough, but carrying it actually sort of acted like a security blanket for you. It kind of slowly eased you out of the hole that September 11th put you in.
Right.
Have you
It was
considered
interesting.
that?
It's interesting because here's another analogy that kind of came from all of this is throughout my existence after 9/11, I had a lot of struggles. I had a lot of struggles. And I tried to find things that would work to fill that hole. But if you look at it from a perspective of, I had a hole in front of me, and all I would see was that hole in front of me. So I would take dirt from behind me and fill that hole in front of me, not knowing that if I took one bad step, that I'd fall into that hole that I just dug behind me. The analogy of that actually started to make sense to me because I kept trying to not kind of walk around the holes and just know that they're there. I tried to fill them, but then I'd make more holes in the process of filling them, and that was the hard part of all of this is Yeah, I like the quote of life isn't a practice session, um, because that's one of the biggest things that I've learned. You know, I lost my dad a year and a half ago to cancer. Like he didn't smoke, he didn't do any. I mean, he was my biggest support, and it doesn't make shit doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense, and that's the hard thing is we try to tangibly have it make sense. Like, why did 3,000 people and 343 firefighters die in that day? It doesn't make it never made sense. It still doesn't make sense to me. I can't wrap my head around that kind of stuff. You know, why did my dad have to go and so early? It doesn't make sense to me. And that's the hardest part of all of this is when I look at that, when we look at the scope, and that's what I'm trying to get away from, is because I think a lot of people who struggle with the traumatic, in essence, traumatic brain injury is what it comes down to. Think of things in such a long-term plan, and they get stressed and frustrated, or they try to understand things that we're not meant to be able to understand.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so the frustration level just mounts and mounts and mounts. And you get to a point where you go, I don't want to deal with this anymore.
Yeah.
It'd be easier just not to deal with this. Have I gotten to that point? Yes, I have. Is that hard to like say from a perspective of when people look up to you to be an inspiration and impact? Oh, hell yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. It makes, you don't follow your own stuff. It's like, yeah, I follow my own things. That's what my life's been about. But at the same time, I'm not perfect, never, nor will I ever be.
You know, what you just said reminded me of my favorite movie quote of all time. And it's deserves got nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
And as right, that
Yeah.
movie Unforgiven for the uninitiated out there, 1992's Unforgiven.
Great
Um,
movie.
Powerful in a million ways.
Yeah.
Because it really is a story about redemption through the unredeemable.
Yeah.
And why I think it matters and why I think it speaks into your message is none of us qualify.
Yeah.
Really. I
Yeah.
don't care how intelligent we are, you know, we can talk about those things another time, but there's this tremendous expectation in culture that says,
Mhm.
well, I have a PhD. I was born with an extraordinary skill. I'm incredibly handsome. Whatever anybody sort of believes about themselves or what they've heard from others, right? It sort of becomes your identity. And
Right.
then, especially in a Western culture, you're supposed to monetize it, which
Yeah.
which is really absurd.
Yeah.
And then we're told if we don't monetize it, we're failures. We're
Yeah.
failures. That how dare you not be, the best triathlete in the world? How dare I not be a world famous drummer? Because we have these skills that others don't have. And how come when your friends are all doing it, how come you're not? What kind of loser are you? What's wrong with you? What didn't you figure out about yourself? How come your ego's in the way? And
Mhm.
and the reality is deserves got nothing to do with it.
Right.
Some people, going back to my friend Dave's quote, if we're tasked with moving forward and living forward for those that don't get to, doing what we are best at is what we're called to do,
Mhm.
regardless if we monetize it and regardless of the impact it creates.
Right.
But we'll never create impact unless we do the thing we're extraordinary at. Because
Yeah.
that's why we're gifted with it, man. It's not about us. And specifically in American culture, and I hope every listener is hearing this right now because this is your message, is
Yeah.
stop trying to make it about you and
Mhm.
make what you do about others, because that changes everything.
You're so right in the fact. I mean, it's so interesting how I remember hearing a story about one of the world champion football, NFL world champion, And they interviewed him the day after, and they said, "What, God, what does it feel like today?" And he said, "It feels like crap." And they're like, "What? It feels like crap?" It's like, "Yeah, I, I I won the Super Bowl. Now
Yeah.
what?
Yeah.
Now what?"
Yeah. Where do I go?
Yeah, and so you look at it from a perspective of, I can't have goals that are finish lines. And I always tell people this is like, they ask, what's your favorite part of a race when you're in full firefighter gear on, and you're gonna finish this, Ironman triathlon. And I said it's a mile out. And I said, and they're like, what? I said it's a mile out from the finish line. I said, you know why? Because I can be by myself a mile out, or with my family, and I don't need that finish line to feel accomplished. I know what I did through my actions today is what I set out to. The medal, the photos at the finish line, whatever it is all subsidiary of what my actual goal was. And I actually, somebody once told me the quote of, don't worry about finishing, focus on completing.
Hmm.
So from the fact of that is like the finish line for an Ironman triathlon is 140.6 miles.
Good Lord, dude.
What does it mean to complete that? Like if I got through 100 miles, I completed what my journey was for that day. And that's the different way of looking at things. Is like all these things. I got the Guinness World Record in 2015, and everybody's, oh, what did it feel like? I was like, well, it sucks because I have to dust it all the time. It's hanging on my wall. It's a
I
piece of
don't have any
paper.
more Guinness World Records to have. I've got the one.
I got the
Son
one.
of a
And
bitch.
yeah, but it's so funny because you look at it from a perspective, and this is the one thing I want people to take away of, we see people who are successful and we go, I want to get to there. I want to get that.
Yeah.
And you have to look back a little bit to what is deemed as successful. What is deemed as that level of amazing? Realistically in life, you have to go away from that feeling that I want to be successful. Feeling of being of value in life is what you need to look at. And when I say, what do being of value is living the potential. And you made a great point of this, is knowing that each one of us has something special to give to this world. Think of it, if we were tolerant enough, if we are not egotistical enough, if we were able to listen to each person in this world and get one little piece, even maybe two, think of how much better this world could be. We base our success values, we base our finish lines off of individuals, one or two people's ideas of, this is the finish line, this is your success. You need to look at yourself and go, no, I don't care what your success level is. I want to feel value, and the person that can tell me what my value is me.
Yeah. While you were saying that, I was thinking about the relationships I've had over the years. And okay, so I'm 54 years old, and I'm a hyper person. It's pretty evident in our conversations. I'm kind of passionate, and
Yeah.
and so my friends tend to be passionate. They tend not to be quiet and soft, because God forbid, we walk into a room and one of us is overwhelmed and the other one's just going constantly. But I have a friend who shall remain unnamed, who's a significant business leader in the tech community and was one of the founders of Sun Microsystems long time ago. And he's a billionaire, one of those
Right.
cool guys. And I haven't seen this guy in maybe 15 years. But I love him. He's fantastic. He's got just this unbelievable energy, And he's the guy who gets up at 4 a.m. and goes to bed at 1 a.m. And when he gets up at 4 a.m., he works out for 3 hours, because the idea of sitting down. I mean, I would never want this man's life.
No.
But he gets it done, But what happens is, whenever, again, I haven't seen him in a long time, but whenever we would get together for lunch, he would wolf the food down in a way that was just, it was kind of disturbing. And when you would have a conversation, it was really, to be fair, it was one-sided because he really wasn't listening. He was just waiting for me to stop talking. And it's not that he recognized it, and he wasn't trying to be rude in any way, but I realized you could literally watch this guy eat his food, and then while you were talking, he would smack his lips because he's waiting for you to finish. It was like he was preparing his mouth to go. And so it made me think, what you just shared made me think that what I don't want to be, what I don't want our friends, yours and mine friends, the people that we influence, I don't want them to think that we're just waiting for them to stop so we can continue to tell them how awesome we are or what kind of stories we have to share with them to make them better. Because the truth is, even if your story, Rob, is vital, and I believe it is vital, and I believe your experiences are important to share because helping somebody through their own sort of version of PTSD, war experiences, whatever. And I don't want to talk about the ugly parts. It's important. It's important that regardless of how important a story we have to share, that the person receiving it is heard. That they're not just sitting there waiting to collect our ideas, but they're prepared to now share back. And it's our biggest honor to actually listen to what they have to say, because their impact back to us changes our game and elevates us as well. It's the whole, the tide raises all ships sort of philosophy. What's your take on that?
I love that, because it's interesting that you say that, because when I do keynotes, and when I do a keynote speech, it's interesting because it's very stressful to me because of the fact that I think only a one-time conversation with somebody, how big of an impact can you make on their daily habits, on their ability to go after their dreams? And that's why I kind of changed up my thought process of, I'd love to do a keynote, but then also at the same time, come back and help these people to actually understand how the 7 catalysts that I talk about applies to their life. Because that's great that they listen to how I came up with it and how it impacts my life still and the stories that came from it. But that's only one piece of the pie. You can go to a seminar in a week for a week-long seminar on how to motivate yourself, but it's not that 5 days that you're at the seminar. It's day 10 after the seminar that means the most, because did you take away what you needed to actually adapt in your life? Did you take away something that you're able to maybe impact somebody else's life? When I get up on the stage, I always say, the first thing I say is, I'm not here to change your life today. If one or two of you take away a little piece of that, what I say today, and change a part of your life to actually be able to impact others, that's all I care about.
Yeah.
Because when I started speaking, it's interesting, because I'm sure this is the same way, like when you were on stage. It's like you want to make sure everybody's having a good time. You want to make sure everybody feels that music or feels every word of your speech. And I did that for so long. And then I finally go, not everybody cares. Not
Not even
everybody
kind of.
wants to care. And that's okay. Not everybody's going to get my story or even care that I walk in fire gear. They're like, oh, that's dumb. Why would you ever think about doing that? That's the dumbest thing I've ever thought about. And that's okay. But it's those 2 or 3 people that you go in there. You have to do it because you love it. If I don't impact anybody in a speech, sorry, this is my life. I get nervous not for speaking. I get nervous because I actually have to tell stories that actually happened to me, that actually impacted my life, that caused a change in trajectory, a change in emotions. And I relive those every single time I say it. I don't have my speeches written out. I have an outline that I go off of. And so every single time I go out, I'm telling you from my heart. Abraham Lincoln said, or no, Mark Twain, I'm sorry, Mark Twain said, you don't have to memorize a true story. And it's such a true statement because you need
That's
to have
so
that.
good. Yeah. No, man, I'm so glad you said that because I'm gonna reveal myself. I gotta say one thing because of what you just said. I because I love performing and I love speaking and I
Mhm.
love drumming, right? Drumming's my favorite thing in the whole world.
Yeah.
Um, but I have to admit that no matter how, in a sense, I'm appreciative of the gift, but no matter how gifted I am, it doesn't change the fact that I'm doing it for others.
Mhm.
And I'll admit it, I absolutely love the adoration that comes from it. I love it.
Yeah.
It feels the God-sized hole. It fills the gap
That's right.
in my spirit. And I don't know. I guess I'm just making a roundabout circle here, but I just think it's important to not feel guilty about that gift either,
Yeah.
if that makes sense. Like I wanted to say that out loud because I we all sort of unintentionally, selfishly
Mhm.
make it about us. You
And I
know,
think, yeah, I think the biggest thing is it's about perspective. And I think that's where it is, you know, you can go all in with saying, I'm just doing, like we were talking about success before, is that if the only thing that you're driving towards is a success that was put in front of your face that is from another person's ideals,
yeah,
that's going to be hard because realistically, that may not be something that you could ever accomplish. Or
yeah,
realistically, that may be so below what your standards are that it's going to be boring.
yeah,
So there has to be the perspective, and I think that's what I was talking about from the speaking. I love when people love the story or come up and say stuff because the perspective is that I want people to enjoy it, but I have to also have the understanding that not everybody is going to enjoy it, and not everybody's looking for that right now. And that's in our lives, perspective is probably one of the hardest things to have
yeah,
because you have Instagram, Facebook telling you, hey, if you look like this in a swimsuit, you're successful. It's
yeah,
like, I haven't
yeah,
looked like that in a swimsuit since I was 10, you
yeah.
know?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I what you're saying is so true. I think and I'm not defining what you're saying here.
No,
But my
no, yeah.
takeaway from this is it's about the lens.
Yes. Yes.
We all have a lens. The lens changes every second. It's not just like, oh, I'm seeing things through Fireman Rob's lens today, or
Right.
Fireman Rob's lens because this is who Fireman Rob it is. This is saying half an hour ago I got in an argument with my wife. Half an hour ago I just bought a coffee for a guy. Half an hour ago I just interviewed my favorite movie star. Half an hour
Right.
ago, I just spoke to 25 veterans who all lost legs.
Yeah.
Every second affects us, and we're all so full of crap that we can sort of profess that nothing at the moment affects us, and maybe it bounces off of us. Maybe we are a little Teflon, right? And it's
Mhm.
not so hard for us to through and a lot of that comes with time and experience,
Yep.
but that lens, realizing you have a lens is one, and that in that not seeing it the way somebody else is doesn't make them right or wrong. I mean, these are obvious things,
And
but
yeah.
but
Yep.
but it, but that it constantly changes. It's the never ending what's the word, adaptability, right?
Adaptation. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
There's three things in life that are constants, right? Death, taxes, and change.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. And it's funny when I love the way that you put it, because if you think about it from a perspective of maybe if a teenager or somebody, a young adult is listening to this, and think about like Instagram. So as you progress through your different phones, like the aging of the phones, you get different lenses. Some are more clear, some are more, blurry. But at the same time, we're so affixed with putting filters on the reality that we're not able to understand that as we look through the lens, that's our reality. That's our engagement. That's our right now. And it's okay to want to put a filter on, but don't put a filter on, because this is real. This isn't a test subject. This isn't a practice session and you get to come back and do it again. This is right now. And the filters are other people's ideas of what it should look like.
Yeah.
How are they supposed to know what your life should look like? And I love that you put it like the lens, because it's so true. And then you add in the filters and you add in, the masks and all that stuff. It's like, this is our society. We created an app to be able to mimic what we go through emotionally in society. I can put a mask on and pretend that I'm not having a bad day, pretend that I don't want to go out there and not be around anymore.
Yeah.
I can
And
put
we're
a
told
filter
we're
on
supposed
because,
to. And we're told
yeah,
we're
exactly.
supposed to. Yeah.
Exactly. And or I can change, oh, gosh, I don't feel good today. I'm too white, or I'm too tan, or whatever. I can put on a
Too white.
filter and make myself feel better.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where it's like, we are so fixated on what is not right in front of us and what is the reality of what we are dealing with.
Yeah. Man, Rob, let's get to the heart of this though. Okay.
Yes.
The reason you're on the call today, tell me where all this momentum is taking you, because I mean, I know, you've had all these experiences. You are still an active firefighter. You're a public speaker, as you mentioned, a keynote speaker. You've done a number of triathlons, and we could certainly talk about that. You running with 50 pounds or more on your body, which I can't even imagine doing a triathlon, let alone doing it willfully with extra crap on my body. And the ego, my ego would be crushed every 5 seconds as I walk by the guy going, look at the fat, slow guy. But what I want to know is where is all this momentum taking you? Because you have a vision. It's clear. We've talked about this on our personal, private offlines, but share with the audience, what's the point? Because I know you have an end game, even though it's malleable and it's going to change. Where's the direction this is all going?
So, realistically, when I look at it from a directional, because it's taken me so long to get to this point, because so many people have said, oh, this is how you should speak, or this is how you should do your workshops, or this is how you should do this. And realistically, it all came back to me and said, okay, be yourself, be who you are, impact lives, because you didn't get to this point easily. How can others who are going through the same thing, or going through something maybe similar soon, how can they take your information and take a little piece of it and make a habit in their life and actually move forward in their lives? So what I did is I really, over a probably 10, 15-year process, put together this information, the 7 catalysts: purpose, ownership, decisions, emotional control, resilience, faith over fear, and mental strength. And I put those into a bunch of different things: a book, my speech, a short TED talk that I have, an online course. And then what we're going to be able to do is go in with a workshop, go into firehouses and do emotional intelligence tied in with those 7 catalysts, and help to actually minimize what these individuals are going through as they progress through their careers in the military, in the police, in the fire, and in the EMS, and frontline workers in hospitals, to help them to identify those key characteristics in themselves. Because we have tools, we have the capability with tools right now to be able to tangibly give these individuals the opportunity not to change their lives, but to understand them. You have to understand first before you change them. So being able to put all these things into a nice tight package to be able to help people who are struggling, to be able to help individuals, whether it be corporate. I mean, everybody always asks me, what's your niche? And I go, well, I've spoken at the 3M merger with Scott Safety, and I spoke at a cheerleaders conference in Wisconsin. So you tell me what my niche is. I pretty much, my niche is people.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and I think salespeople go, oh my God, I can't sell that. And it's like, yeah, you can, because realistically, what I like to sell, I do human performance coaching. I don't do life coaching. I don't know their life. I'm not in their life.
Yeah.
I do human performance. Human performance is every single day when you wake up at either 4 a.m. or 10 a.m. From that moment until you go to bed, that's your human performance. What do you want to be? How do you want to maneuver through your life? And like you were talking about the plan, it's like you can have a plan, but be okay. I always say it's productive adaptability. Productive adaptability is talking about the being true to who you are and what you are, but being capable of changing to be able to be the best possible you possible. So a lot of people like to change because somebody else is doing something that's trending.
Yeah.
But don't change who you are to try that. And that's the
Yeah.
biggest.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, you're good.
Yeah. I love the fact that you mentioned the idea of seeing something that makes you go, oh, maybe I should do that. Right. Because that's right. I mean, we're all sort of, we talk about this sort of ADD concept of, oh, look at the shiny object. Man, I don't know one human being that isn't looking at the shiny object. Because Dax Shepard, the actor and the well-known podcaster, he said something really profound that completely it resonated with me in a way probably no other show had ever. And I listened to his show almost religiously because of it, because I thought, okay, here's a guy I actually understand. I'm kind of as weird as him. Sure, I'm not as famous as him, but I have the same sort of emotional baggage and the weird crutches and all the little things that I don't feel good about myself, how I look or how I behave or how tall I am or how short I am or how muscular I am or whatever.
Yeah.
He had said that as he grew up, he grew up poor, and of course that's a definition in itself, right? Because I know kids that grew up. There's an area near here called Sammamish. It's between the city of Seattle and where I live. And I'll be frank, I live in a very, very nice area. I live in a very wealthy area, and I'm blessed to live here. It's a beautiful place. But these kids, they live in this upscale locale called Sammamish, and it's this ridge and it's beautiful and all the homes are 6,000, 8,000 square feet. And I'll hear them say things like, well, we don't have a lot. And I'm thinking, dude, you have thousands of dollars of condiments.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just this, there's no perspective. And I get it. They're kids. And I mean, when I say kids, I'm talking about like late teens. They still they're not fully formed. They don't know what it's like in the real world, so to speak. But I think yeah, I mean, I'm sorry. I guess I'm rambling again. I kind of lost my train of thought. But Dax's whole thing on money was, I'm poor. And the thing is, he really was. He grew up, on the main streets of Detroit with a stepfather that didn't like him so much. All the issues that we hear about, and these motivating factors come in place. And then if you really want something, and if you're a hard charger, people will go after it. I've gone after it. Dax went after it. You're going after it. So regardless of our childhoods, we go after it because we're those people. Dax said, here I am. I've actually hit it out of the park. I've done everything I wanted in my life. I married the gorgeous girl, because he did. That's another conversation there. I've made millions of dollars. I live in a nice neighborhood. I have impact. I have a future, and nothing has changed. And I found that really profound. He said, I knew that nothing had been repaired in my soul when I was trying to get I think it was a flight to Reno or Las Vegas. And he went down to the airport, and this is a couple years ago. So this was just recently. He went down to the airport And he walked up and he said, I need a, one-way ticket to, whatever, Vegas. And they said, oh, I'm sorry, there's no tickets. And he's like, what? And he's like, but I have to be there like in 3 hours. And they're like, well, I'm sorry, there's no ticket. And so he went to the bar and he's drinking. And he's just feeling sorry for himself because he realized he has millions of dollars in the bank and he can't get somewhere because the world doesn't allow it. In other words, it doesn't matter what you've got. There's just times when it's not going to work out for you. And if you're putting all your value in isms, in things, in what somebody thinks about you, right. Even guys like us who say, we're proud because we're willing to shout from the rooftops, we're on a mission of power and purpose. So sometimes deserve's got nothing to do with it, and you're just not going to go there. And so you gotta unweave the value of self based on everything you are and what you've experienced and where you think you're going, what you think you deserve, because it's always going to change.
Yeah. There's always that. There's always that mile from the finish.
Yeah.
There's always a new mile from the finish, and the finish line may never be there for you, but that's okay.
So where are you going from now? I mean, to sort of cap this off, to make this the big powerful ending with my friend Fireman Rob. What's 2021 look like, and where are you heading, and how can people, be involved in your life? How can they let you in to impact them?
Go to firemanrob.com. That's one of the best things. I have my blog on there, the podcast. I've got all sorts of different things that you can involve. I actually have my personal email on there. I answer my emails. So send me a message if you have a question, if you have a concern, if you are looking for some advice on something. I'm always here. I mean, I'm open to doing that because that's the bigger mission. Like you were saying before, does it really matter how much money at the end of the day you make? No, it doesn't. Are you happy? That's what matters. Are you happy, and do you feel a value? And at the end of the day, my services that I do, my keynote speeches, my workshops, my human performance coaching, it's all about creating a new person for somebody else. It's all creating their passion. And I'll end on my favorite statement that I always make on all my shows and all my things is, life doesn't get any easier. You just get stronger when you follow your passion. So go out there and live it.
Oh my gosh, dude. I don't even have a follow-up for that. That's like, I'm the host, dude. I'm supposed to end big. That's not fair. Come on.
See, now I feel privileged that I actually made Rockstar Rob speechless. Can I just drop my mic and leave?
Yeah, I think we're gonna have
something on my mind.